In this video, we discuss the development of a unit plan. A unit plan is essentially a document that, in most cases, is developed by the subject matter expert, and it provides guidance to the content writer as they develop the learner guide and assessments. In some cases, the unit plan may be developed by a content writer. This would be because they would have expertise in the unit of competency or content area. However, the unit plan would still be endorsed by the subject matter expert. The unit plan provides an opportunity for the subject matter expert and the content writer to collaborate and begin to plan how to best address the unit of competency. A unit plan has a number of aspects. It will identify learning outcomes as noted in the unit of competency. It will suggest topics and subtopics, possible learning activities, relevant assessment tasks, and even resources that should be considered by the writer. The best way to understand a unit plan, however, is to have a look at an example. So bear with me, and I will open what is essentially the unit plan template, but this one has been partially completed to help you begin to understand how to fill in the different columns and aspects of the unit plan. So some of the basic information is, of course, the unit code and name and the subject matter expert name and date and so on. One of the first things that the subject matter expert, or if it's the content writer developing the unit plan, needs to do is to access the unit of competency from training.gov. And it's best to capture that link in the document itself. So if I click through, we should open up training.gov. And you can download the unit of competency in a Word format. So teachers would be familiar with this document. It identifies any specific requirements for the unit of competency, the elements and performance criteria, the required skills and knowledge, and the critical aspects that must be evident in the assessment completed by the students, recommended methods of assessment, and a range statement of what must or may need to be included. So the first and sort of major task for the subject matter expert is to copy and paste much of this information into the unit plan. So if we go back to our example, and I will zoom in, you'll see that most of that information will appear down the left-hand side. So here we have the first element and the first performance criteria. Now, only a few performance criteria have been included in the example, but you can see we have the required skills, required knowledge, critical aspects, methods, and the range statement. And this has been abbreviated a little bit as well for this example. So then, the subject matter expert will progressively complete these columns. So let's step through and discuss what needs to be put into these areas. In the light blue column, you will put in suggested topics and really subtopics that would appear in the learner guide. So in most cases, an element might form the basis of a topic. And that's why this subject matter expert has even suggested a short name for the topic, sort of abbreviating the element and making it nice and pithy. Then we have a look at the performance criteria. So just quickly reading that, we can see it requires the student to use appropriate network strategies. Well, the learner guide then may have subtopics such as what is a network, what is a strategy, and some suggested dot points of what needs to be covered in the learning material. And so on. So we might identify from this performance criteria that a suitable subtopic might be types of opportunities or networking opportunities. And once again, there are some dot points. These dot points actually come from the range statement, and we'll revisit that shortly. And this continues throughout. When you get to the required skills, you may find that many of these actually fit nicely under the various elements of performance criteria. It's ideal if they do. If they don't, you would need to write some additional material in the learner guide. But if they do, you can simply make a note. It's almost just a sort of a quick check to say, well, this required skill actually was covered in performance criteria 3.3. There are little notes here as well. And once again, this is for the subject matter expert to let the content writer know that this required skill could be covered by providing a scenario and so on in the learner guide. You can take the approach similarly for critical aspects if you just want to ensure that you've sort of covered the material, making a note of what performance criteria would address that. So the light blue column is essentially the content in the learner guide. The dark blue column is also content in the learner guide, but it focuses specifically on activities that the student might undertake. Now, these aren't necessarily classroom activities. They are activities that in most cases the student will complete as they're reading through the learner guide, either in print format, but in most cases in the online environment. Now, if you need some assistance in understanding what types of activities would be appropriate, I recommend that you have a look at the content writer guide that's also provided in your induction material. However, note that it will be found in the content writers folder area. So it's this document here. And I may actually have it open and we'll have a look at the section on learning activities. So very briefly, the activities involve the student doing something such as listening or watching or discussing, and they could be some quiz style activities throughout the topic, and at the end of every topic we require a few quiz style questions that help reinforce the learner's understanding of what they've read and hopefully motivate and engage them. Please keep in mind that all of these activities are not accessible. So as mentioned, there could be activities where the learner is required to do something such as reflect and research. And the guide provides you several examples. They could be quiz style questions. So if you've had a paragraph of information, you might have a matching activity to test the learner's understanding of what they have read. Now these quiz style questions are also then able to be used at the end of the topic when you do your self-check. So when you're doing your unit plan, please keep in mind that those are the activities that we're recommending that you consider. Now you don't need to provide an activity for every single performance criteria. The content writer may find that as they're writing, the activities will sort of become evident. What you're doing here is making suggestions of any that you think are particularly relevant or important. Now, the next three columns are to do with the assessment. So, wherever possible, we require that assessment 1 be a questioning or quiz assessment. And so here you can take a moment to see which performance criteria might lend itself to being assessed using a quiz. So these are just sort of examples if we were looking at the performance criteria about using network strategies, we might ask students to identify what a network is or what suitable strategies are, etc. Now, not every performance criteria will have a quiz question. In fact, many may not lend themselves to a quiz-style approach. You may find that the quiz assessment is useful for reviewing the underpinning required skills and required knowledge. Now, with assessments 2 and 3, the subject matter expert can make a recommendation of what those assessments are. In this example, they've actually noted that there is already an existing booklet, and hopefully they would provide that resource to the content writer. And then you follow a similar sort of approach where you're identifying any specific tasks that you think need to be included in the assessments because they help address the performance criteria or the critical aspects, etc. So, for example, here, once again, with the required skills 5 requires students to have technology skills and so on. And there's just a quick note here to say that assessment 2 does that through the use of a social media platform, LinkedIn. Likewise, with critical aspects, you can make a note that the critical aspect 1 is addressed by the evidence of a student actually participating in a network event or listing opportunities and so on. So once again, this is to give guidance to the content writer as they are developing the assessments. And now finally, the very last column is resources. Now, if there is any specific resources that the person developing the unit plan wants to highlight, they can leave instructions here. Or, if you would like to map a resource to a performance criteria, then you would use this column. So in this instance, the subject matter expert has identified some web pages and several YouTube videos that would be relevant to the performance criteria. So the content writer might consider using these when they're developing their learner guide. So when they're developing these different topics, they should also review those resources to see if they can be included in the material or even be the basis for an activity. Now remember, these templates and examples are provided to you in your induction pack. So we'll just return back to that. So following the links that are provided to you, you'll find the example blank template to complete, and then several examples, including the one that we've reviewed, and others completed by subject matter experts. If you have any questions, of course, don't hesitate to contact the product development unit or your product architect for further assistance. Thank you.